and to self-centeredness, because those who are God-realized know no difference between themselves and God, or between themselves and God's creation even. They're at one with it. And we, in our state of human frailty, make separation that is our natural state. We feel separate. And so, in a way, the game is how to overcome separateness. And there are many little techniques that He has given us for overcoming separateness. And God Speaks does bring out a great deal of the necessary framework of thinking which allows us to overcome separateness. Because someone said, with all thy getting, get the understanding. And God Speaks provides that kind of understanding which can bring about honest action honest thoughts, honest words, honest deeds. We consciously do not know the planes that we get onto, because it is the technique of the avatar not to disclose that to his followers. His devotees are taken, as he said, under a veil. And the reason for that is that on certain planes, we do not have the ability to continue the journey, but we could get easily sidetracked with the glamour of it, on the experiences of it, which enhance when one is on higher planes. One gets increased attributes of power and knowledge, and it is much more tempting to remain there and get fixed or attached to this plane. So out of the mercy of the God-man who loves his devotees, his children, he says he takes us under a veil.
Yeah, right.
He explained once in my presence how two disciples, which are misunderstood sometimes because they're disciples from the time of Jesus Christ, namely St. Peter and Judas, were both taken under a veil. And of course, from the ordinary standpoint, St. Peter did, at one time when Jesus was apprehended by the Romans, he tried to save himself, and when asked who he was, he denied that he was a follower of Jesus. So why would he deny that? I had the occasion to ask Baba. He said he loved me the most, but he had to do that. He had to do it. It was, if you like, scripted for him by God, and he had to do it. And the same with Judas, which was even more difficult to understand, because he had to betray him, and in that way, of course, he was finally apprehended and taken to be crucified. So in that way, Baba said, Judas served me the best, and what Judas did, no one else could do. Because I did it. In fact, he didn't do it. I did it. Those were the words Baba told us as we were sitting with him. And he did it unconsciously. I had to take him under a veil, Baba, you said. And actually he was God-realized, just like the others. The 12 disciples were God realized. That is, when the avatar comes, the 12 around him are perhaps more in this age, which is called the cycle of cycles, this Advent. So that is the work that is done by many of the chosen, elected ones is done under certain sanskaras which do not reveal to them what planes they're on, although they are undoubtedly very close to the highest plane because they're all going to be God realized. Will we understand that?
And sanskaras, does that mean that their sanskaras are eliminated at a certain point?
Are they what?
Or the sanskaras become eliminated altogether at a certain point, right?
Yes, that of course is, I would say, best explained in his discourses. He has many discourses on the impressions or the sanskaras. On every level, we, of course, our consciousness is such that on the level of the senses, touch, taste, smell, hearing, all of them, we pick up impressions, and those impressions finally have to be, of course, eliminated, wiped out, so that the only impression is that of what it brings us closer to God, so unifying us with the Source, with the One. There's not many, Baba says, but one. I am the one behind the many. I am the only one behind the many. The motivation for reading it, in my case, was because Meher Baba himself asked me to read it, and to read it more than once. And if possible, to certainly bear in mind that the divine theme, which is like the core of it, should be really utilized all the time to keep one properly focused with the goal. And it helps very much, as far as I'm concerned, in providing a more objective approach to our own very human state of falling prey to emotional responses to life. That puts one in touch with a more abstract and abstract map of life, and doesn't allow one to dwell too long in the personal, and to overcome the personal and become impersonal about one's own self is a tremendous leap ahead. I mean, we are very insignificant if you stop to think about it, because there's only one behind the many. So Baba said nothing is worth taking seriously except, guess what? Your lack of love for God. Otherwise, don't sweat the small stuff. We're all small stuff.
Yeah.
Not to put us down, because God has really, in the whole goal, He said, you too are avatars. All of you are avatars. And all of you might, I think, in 1954, the message he gave on the alphabet board for the very last time, the last message he gave, perhaps it's the one he gave after he dropped the alphabet board, but that is a very powerful message. If you like, I could read part of that. But that explains the whole purpose of why he wants us not to depend emotionally, you might say, or sentimentally on the external form of God, but to depend on the truth, which is that we are all bound to one another with internal links through him. And in that way, too, one would not be apt to remain in a more selfish state where one is just thinking of one's own needs and which is really very contrary to Baba's whole purpose. And the purpose is that of engendering more and more thoughts, words, and deeds that are motivated by love so that we can receive his grace. That's what that's what we need to beg for. Know how to beg for his grace. And it is through good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. It isn't through any other means. He actually explained that when the avatar is in this, is with us in this Advent, the manifestation time, until and when he is with us, that is when he, as contrasted to when the perfect masters, the Sadhgurus, come into the world's activities. When the avatar is still with us, this is the time when we just need to focus on him. To meditate is something which will be much more considered. Each kind of meditation or each kind of yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, or one yoga or another, will be considered much more when the avataric advent is totally over. And if after the advent is at this time, from the time he dropped his body, which was 1969, until 100 years approximately, he will still be manifesting. As Bell puts it so aptly in his book, Avatar, the Age Meher Baba Manifesting, which is in process. The full manifestation will maybe, if we figure it as 100 years, would be 2069. At that time, there should, according to the metaphysical teaching of all of this, the perfect masters would start to become more prominent, would be known. And then meditation will take on much, much more significance in terms of focal point. One can still think of Meher Baba, indeed, but I'm not familiar with how life will be when the perfect masters are manifested. Have not lived at that time. Most fortunately, I was born when Baba was already avatar. And that's what we have to be so extremely aware of and grateful for, that we've known the avatar, whether in the body or not. So meditation in this life, what I've known about it is that in our group in New York, which I functioned in some years ago, the question of how much we should meditate arose, and when we wrote to Baba, and he said, again, the most important thing is to remember him, and that we could meditate, of course, on him for about, just sitting still and meditating, about 15 minutes is just fine. But it is not exactly the mode of life in the Western world that encourages too much long-sitting meditation. Baba made that very plain. That the yoga of the West is karma yoga, by which Baba explained is selfless service, as close as you can get to the self. Of course, he's the only selfless person, but we try to forget ourselves. I mean, how do you remember God best? Forget yourself and do what you have to do. Well, that's why I suggest everybody read God Speaks. They'll find out just how different. I say that from my little understanding, first of all, there are 5 of them, and not just one avatar. And they have different, their hierarchical formation, if you like, would be different. They would have, Baba had 122 disciples. He had 10 circles of 12 disciples. They would have, I think, I know in the God Speaks it explains, they have a small circle. They have no great detailed explanation is given, but generally speaking, they differ in the greatest way conceivable. That is, they are not the God-man, God-men, or maybe there'll be a woman among them this time, I don't know. Baba has said that they have taken the evolutionary journey. They have started, as everyone starts, from the very basis of evolutionary journey, stone, whatever, and they have taken it up to the human form, and from the human form have gone through involution up to the highest form of that of God-man. All right. Now, Baba's journey was from the beginning that of the Creator in sustainer and preserver, and that pristine soul took the journey for the sake of man, for the sake, he just has no other, has not gone through all the stages as we understand it, but just from the very pristine beginning is God-man. That is very explicit in God Speaks. I really think it'd be worth just reading that.
Yeah.
That's very explicit, that he is God-man from the very start, whereas perfect masters go through every inch of the journey as on an unconscious level at first, and then on the highest level, and they do not return. The avatar, of course, the real significant difference is the avatar is indeed God and comes back on one of his journeys because he is also in the beyond state. There are several states of God, but when God comes to this planet Earth, he returns every 700 to 1400 years as what is called Avatar in the Hindu tradition, Messiah, Christ, Kutub, whatever term is derived from any of the mystical religions, he returns as the same pristine original God with a different contemporary message, contemporary form, physical form, but it is the same one avatar. I think the perfect masters, when they leave their duties as perfect masters, they do not return. I think they just ultimately return to beyond state, but they do not have that as their function to come back to the universe. Read God Speaks because he gives you a very good explanation for that they get a kind of preparation on other planets. There are human life on about 18,000 other planets. And they get the preparation by either enhancing the intellect, actually, to such an extent that it becomes 100% intellect. These are where Baba has said that's where our scientists have often come from. The scientists do come from where they really have developed mind to that extent, 100% intellect. And then there is the planet which is 75% intellect, still pretty high up there, and 25% heart. But Baba said, don't go there either. I only come to Earth where there is this, and where many of you have been. We have come from some of those other planets. But I need Earth because it is only when there's this melding, whatever terms he uses, of course, of the 50% heart and 50% mind. That is when you have the condition for God realization. But it has to be this balance. And of course, then ultimately you have to jump over that mind, Manonesh. And so, you see, it becomes a very, very kind of subtle explanation if you want to go into details of God Speaks. Baba has said a lot about America, but I think we have to find that passage where, and it has to be explained, because he said, America is my great ground for bringing together all the white races. That could be badly misunderstood. But he actually said that. And let's see, who had the best explanation of that? I don't remember. Bao had some explanation of that, where he bring together all the white races. Now, you know, that could be very explosive. I mean, well, this is called the Divine Theme with charts. It was given to me in the... well, let's see. There is a note here from Mani, which seems to be 1967, and a copy of the Divine Theme was signed, autographed by beloved Baba Meherazad in 1967, and then there is Baba's autograph. It was true that when I was invited to live with Norina and Elizabeth and Dean Tolstoy in the late 40s, that I was told eventually, I don't remember what year, that Baba did want us to read God Speaks. And then, I don't remember just when. This was, it doesn't, when it states here by Mani that the copy was signed in 1967, In fact, it looks like 57, but it was written over again, and so it became 5 became 6. That was written at the time. It was given to me to read. I don't remember the year, but with the definite reminder that Baba did want us to read God Speaks. Now, this is the very heart of God Speaks, in my opinion. The divine theme covers the title, states evolution, reincarnation, and the path to realization, with charts. And it does just that. It gives you, in brief, the very thesis of God Speaks: evolution, reincarnation, and the path to realization.
Now, this came out before God Speaks was actually published. Then.
You have to check that.
Okay. All right.
You have the book.
Uh-huh.
And in the book there's an introduction, a preface, and the preface is 55. So, and the preface was written by one of the two people who helped to have the book published, namely Ivy O'Deuce and Donnie Stevens. And that was in 1955. So what I have not determined is just the very year when I received that, if you were interested in that, but that
it's just that I've never...
immaterial. The fact is that I stress the fact that I was told many times to read the book itself, and then when I got this, it was an excellent way of just having a beautiful synopsis, as it were, and then get into the book again. As I told you, this little this separate publication is going to be printed in quantity so that more people have access to it. When I first got this, it was not printed abundantly at all. It was just a few were printed and sent to different individuals.
Were you present when Baba signed it, by any chance?
No. I met Baba for the first time in 1952. I wasn't present, but eventually I got a picture of Baba signing God Speaks. I don't know whether, because I do have a signed copy. And Monty wrote and said, "This is the pen that you gave Baba is being used now while Baba is signing some copies of God Speaks." My copy was, by that time he had signed a number of copies, obviously, and mine was the, it's this very copy you had, the original. This is the original that I got, and so mine was the 309th copy. He had limited to 498 copies, and so 309th copy. Yeah, the copyright of it is 1955, indeed, 1955. Of course, it's been reprinted a number of times.
Yeah, and the Sufis own the copyright to this book still, I believe.
Yes, they do. It was, and it's in the Library of Congress.
Was there any public reaction to this book that you remember? Reviews or?
No, I would say there was no public reaction that I knew of, but there was within the family of Baba lovers. The reaction was that it seemed very difficult to read and understand, and some people would give it up, and other people who felt it was Baba's wish that they read it several times would stick to it. And then, of course, there was this wonderful recollection by Don Stevens, which I'm sure you have written about, had John show you how in his work on the book he had occasion to mention to Baba that the language might be very difficult to comprehend for some people, and Bob explained that regardless of the difficulty and regardless of how incomprehensible it might seem to some people, he urged them to read it because his charge is a divine charge which he has put in every word of his own. And therefore Baba always encouraged people who were disposed to read at all, whether or not they understood it, to continue to read it. And then I definitely have spoken to so many who came to the realization that as they read it, time, more than once, that each time it was really compared to the peeling of an onion, their own consciousness would awaken more. So that, finally, I remember so clearly, so many people said, "Oh my goodness, it was worth all that effort," because as I read it more and more, I understood it more and more. I was so proud of myself for understanding as much as I did, and it was definitely Baba's miracle.
The book it's repetitive, though, right?
Yes, it's repetitive, which is one good way of teaching too. And but it's not only repetitive; it uncovers each time. It might make a step backwards, but then it also uncovers the new seed of thought, and it goes on and on that way until it somehow establishes what is already inwardly understood, because all knowledge is already there. Baba is just being the catalyst to uncover what we already know. Otherwise, he wouldn't have us read it if he didn't feel we already